we need to continue styling our form by completing our form layout and ensuring that our labels are positioned properly. The position of labels and the form elements they represent is in the end a personal choice, but the majority of forms place all labels in front of their form elements, except for radio buttons and checkboxes, which tend to display the labels after the elements. In addition to styling our labels correctly, we also need to bring some order to our checkboxes, and they are a mess right now. As they are now in separate paragraphs, that creates way too much vertical spacing, and it's going to be confusing to any of the users using our form. So using just a little bit of extra markup, we're going to display our checkboxes in 3 columns, and that should help organize our form greatly. So here we have the join.htm from the 1214 Explorers directory open. Once again, I've collapsed our panels down, and I'm focusing on the CSS on the left side of our split view and the form on the right side. Now, I've taken the liberty of doing a few things to our form, and I want to point out to you guys what I have done. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and find our checkboxes, and you're going to see they look a little different. I didn't say they look better yet, but they look a little different. These dotted lines that you're seeing here are div tags. I've taken our checkboxes, we have 9 of them, and split them up into 3 groupings of 3. So if you were to look at the source code, and let me go ahead and click on these again, you would see that these checkboxes are now surrounded by div tags, and the div tags have a class of column 1, column 2, and column 3. So there's column 1, and you can see that's it right there. There's column 2, you can see it right there, and there is column 3. So if you're ever wanting to do this yourself, all you have to do is find your checkboxes, highlight them, and then you can use this little tool right here, wrap tag, to wrap them in a div tag and assign them an ID, or in the case of what we've done here, a class. That just saved us a little bit of time not having to do that ourselves. And one more thing, if I scroll down and look at the labels beside our radio buttons, I can see that they have a class, and I can see that by using our tag selector right here. They have a class now applied to them called inline, so we're going to write a selector that's going to take advantage of that in just a moment. So I'm going to go back to the main.css. There we go. Scroll down. Remember, we're on about line 650, somewhere around in there. And we're actually going to go down to the join form, so around the 689 to 700 range. And we're going to start adding our code here. All right, let's tackle our checkboxes first. I mean, that's a big task, so we'll go ahead and get that out of the way. So on about line 700 there, I'm going to type in pound main content, then a space, form, pound, FRM join. So just the same as we've been doing before. Space, now dot col call 1. So remember, the dot indicates that it's a class, and we're looking for call 1. So any element with the class of call 1 found in the FRM join form, found in main content. I'm going to open up our curly brace and hit return to go down to the next line. And here I'm going to float these to the left. That's going to help us give us our 3-column layout. I'm going to give them some padding to the left. So padding dash left of 20 pixels. Margin right, that's going to keep these guys away from each other a little bit. Margin right, 20 pixels. And I'm going to give the first column a width of 160 pixels. And I calculated that by calculating the width of the field set that they were inside of, how wide their labels need to be, and then kind of sort of splitting the difference. So if you're wondering, how did he know how wide to make that? You basically just figure out how wide your field set's going to be, how much width you need for each of your labels, and kind of factor it that way. Now I'm going to go down to the next line and write a selector for both of my remaining columns. So pound main content, space form, pound FRM join, space dot call 2. Now we're going to apply the same rule to the next two. So I'm actually going to do a comma to group these together, highlight the previous rule and copy it, because there's no reason to type all that over again, and then simply paste that after the comma. Change call 2 to call 3, and now we have a grouped selector that's targeting the column 2 and the column 3 at the same time. I'm going to open up my curly brace, hit return to go down to the next line, and here I'm going to type in float left, just as we did before. These are also going to have a margin right of 20 pixels, so for right now they're almost exactly the same. What is different? Well, in the next line this time, we're going to give them a width of 170 pixels, so they're going to be just slightly larger, about 10 pixels wider. And if I do a save all and click over here in our form now, we can sort of see a 3-column layout coming to fruition. Now, the reason that we're not seeing a really nice 3-column layout, number one, I'm still in design view, And number two, our checkboxes and their labels are still just a little too large. So using our styles, we're going to target the interior contents of these columns and sort of just shrink everything down a little bit. So on the next line in our code right after that, so we're going to type in pound main content space form pound frm join space div. So we're targeting div tags that are inside that form. And to be honest with you, those are the only 3 div tags inside of that. So we know exactly who we are targeting. So here we're going to do a little bit of margin work. I'm going to type in margin 0, 0, space 20 pixels, space 0. So top margin of 0, right of 0, bottom of 20 pixels, and left of 0. So what that's going to do is it's just going to push those headings down a little bit there. Right below that, we're going to target our paragraphs as well inside our div tag. So pound main content, space form, pound frm join, space div, space p. So we're targeting paragraphs inside those div tags now. Once again, open up a curly brace, and here you're going to type in margin, 0 for top, 0 for right, 0.5 ems for bottom, and then 0 for left. And don't forget to close your curly brace there. So now those individual paragraphs, which remember the label and the checkboxes are fitting in a paragraph, that's going to help us space those guys a little bit closer and tighter together. Now, finally, as far as our checkboxes go, let's go ahead and make the labels themselves a little bit smaller so that they fit in within those columns a little bit better. So pound main content, space form, pound frm join, div, space label. So really, those are almost the same. We're just now targeting labels inside of these div tags as well. And here, we want to change our font dash size, so not just font, but font dash size to 0.9 em. So we're shrinking them down a little bit. We're going to display them, so do a display inline. And then for floating, I'm going to choose none. So that's going to take away sort of the default float that's been happening there. We want them to be on their own lines. And we're going to display the labels inline so that the checkbox display is right beside them. And when we click on that now, that looks a lot better. But if we go to live view and scroll down, you can see that now we have our 3-column layout. Perfect. Now we're almost done. You guys are doing a great job. I appreciate you hand coding. I hope that you're finding it to be a little bit to your liking at least. And we have 3 more rules that we need to write here really quickly. First, we need to make sure that our radio buttons are appearing on a single line. Right now, this is all really confusing, so let's go ahead and tackle that first. Right down below this rule and type in pound main content space form pound frm join space label dot inline. So we're targeting any label that has the class inline applied to it. We're going to turn float to none, so we're going to turn floating off, and we're going to give it a width of auto. An auto width basically says ignore the width that was set earlier and allow the content itself to form the width of it. That's going to help that out a lot, and you'll notice by clicking into this design view, our radio buttons are now on a single line. Very good. Now, the only other thing we have left to do, these headlines, how many explore California, I am interested in the following tours, profile bio, those are all sort of subheadings, and they really need to relate to that content a little bit more. There's too much spacing there. There's no real great relationship between them, and the profile bio is sitting beside the form element, which just looks weird. So we're going to write a couple of selectors that are going to help us here, and then we're going to apply some classes, and the overall styling of our form is going to be finished. So I'm going to type in pound main content space form space p dot subhead, and subhead is going to be lowercase s uppercase h. So that's basically saying any paragraph with a class of subhead applied to it inside of our form. And down below that, we're going to type in margin 0 for top, 0 for right, 0 for bottom, and 20 pixels for left. And then we're going to type in clear both. That's going to not allow any floating whatsoever. It's going to make sure that that paragraph stays by itself. But more importantly, we're resetting our bottom margin to 0, which means there won't be a huge amount of space between our paragraphs and our form elements. One last thing, we need to do that to our label as well. So I'm going to go down below that, and I'm going to type in pound main content. Now here we're going to do something a little different. Type in now pound main article as well. So pound main content space pound main article. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Form space label dot subhead. Open up your curly brace, go down the next line. Here we're going to change display to block. We're going to turn float to none. We're going to give it an overall margin of 0 all the way around and give it a width of auto so that the label itself forms the width. All right, so what are we doing here? Well, the reason we're using this main article is because we want this label, which is right here, it's going to be this little guy, to overwrite all the things that came before. In order to do that, we had to make this selector a little bit more specific, which is why main article is in there, because this form is in main article as well as main content. We're changing the display to block. That means it's going to display on its own line. We're turning floating off, and that is going to prevent our form element from floating up beside it like it is now. Margin of 0 means it's going to appear right above it without a whole lot of spacing between it. And then the width of auto says, don't limit yourself to the 125 pixels that we've put on the rest of the labels. You go ahead and be as wide as you want. In order for us to do that, I'm going to turn off live view. I'm going to click inside this text, use the tag selector right down here to select label, and then I'm going to choose subhead. And you can see now it sits right on top of that form element, and it's giving us the spacing that I want. I need to do the same thing with our paragraphs. So I am interested in the following tours. I'm going to click inside that paragraph, click the P tag just to make sure that I've got that. And again, using the properties inspector, I'm going to give it the class of subhead. And then I'm going to do the same thing with right here, how many Explore California tours have you been on? Grab the paragraph and make it subhead. Now if we do a save all, test that in our browser. And as I scroll down, now this part of our form is aligning itself quite nicely. So our form now has a robust layout, very clear visual styling. Although at this point our basic form is done from that standpoint, there is still a little bit of work left to do on our form. In our next movie, we're going to explore making our forms more effective by adding user feedback and interactivity.